The president is one powerful guy, but not so powerful that he can't be held accountable for his actions by Congress and the Supreme Court. This is the carefully devised plan of our founders to limit power by dividing it among several branches of government.
June 17, 1972. 5 men break into the Watergate apartment complex in Washington, D.C. Their mission? To wiretap phones, bug offices, and photograph files at the Democratic Party national headquarters. The police arrested the burglars. As it turned out, they had links to Republican President Richard Nixon's re-election committee. Nixon denied allegations that he was involved in the Watergate break-in. But during a 2-year Senate investigation, it became known that Nixon had secretly tape-recorded all personal conversations in the Oval Office. He refused to release all the tapes, claiming they were irrelevant to the investigation.
The country tonight is in the midst of what may be the most serious constitutional crisis in its history.
The Supreme Court finally resolved the issue of the tapes in July 1974. In the case, United States versus Nixon, the Supreme Court justices unanimously ordered the president to hand over the tapes to federal investigators. When the contents of the tape showed that the president had been involved in the cover-up since the first days after the break-in, the discovery became the smoking gun that no one could defend. Faced with impeachment by Congress, Richard Nixon resigned from the presidency on August 9, 1974.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first.
Ironically, Nixon's demise was orchestrated not just by his own actions, but also through the foresight and brilliance of the writers of the U.S. Constitution. (1787). The founders of our nation meet in the East Room of the Old Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia. It is the same room where the Declaration of Independence had been signed a decade earlier. Here, the nation's founders would draft the Constitution of the United States. They faced a monumental task in drafting this document. They were not just codifying a new body of laws. They were drafting a plan for a radically new form of government. The men who wrote the Constitution wanted to create a government strong enough to ensure national interests, but limited enough to protect personal liberty. Separation of powers was a theory first proposed by the French philosopher Charles de Montesquieu. But our nation's founders wisely decided that separating governmental powers would not be enough. Otherwise, each branch of government would exploit its power at the expense of the others. They needed to devise a system that would require separate but overlapping powers. Each branch would have to work together, moderating between the demands and interests of various groups. Checks and balances. This would be the answer to the division of power. The Constitution divides the United States government into 3 branches. Each branch has certain primary responsibilities. The legislative branch creates laws. Also known as Congress, it is made up of 2 groups, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The executive branch enforces national laws. Led by the president, this branch has the authority to enforce governmental policies. The third is the judicial branch, made up of the court system. The courts make decisions on laws based on the Constitution. It is headed by the Supreme Court. It is not enough, however, to think of these individual branches as standalone institutions. Rather, their power and authority are interrelated and shared. The Supreme Court rules on the constitutionality of laws, but the executive branch has the power to nominate federal judges, pardon individuals convicted in court, and execute court decisions. So the Supreme Court's power is limited by the powers of the executive branch. Congress also has power over the Supreme Court. It can impeach federal judges and rewrite legislation in ways that change the law. But the Supreme Court also has power over the executive and legislative branches. It can declare an executive or congressional action unlawful or unconstitutional. Because they share power, each branch acts as a check on the powers of the other two. When Congress called upon its authority to impeach and remove President Nixon from office, it was demonstrating the wisdom of our founders in creating a system of checks and balances. Today, all democracies place constitutional limits on the power of government, protecting the authority of government and the rights of individuals.